All right, 9 a.m. How you guys doing today? Yeah? All right, all right. We're going to kind of jump in, and there's going to be some stuff that I want to make sure that we cover in the beginning of this series because it's going to be heavy. There will be humor here and there because we like to share through stories, and so there'll be moments where we'll be able to laugh and kind of cut the tension a little bit because the next 4 weeks are going to be real hard. We've been getting emails and having phone calls and all kinds of different communication as people have said, hey, I hear that you're doing this series on anxiety and depression and mental health and mental illness, and what does that look like? And most of the emails and phone calls have been, I'm scared to walk through the door because I don't know if God could accept somebody like me. And I want you to know more than anything else this morning that you are loved, that God desperately loves you and the heartbeat that is beating inside of your chest, in the very being because He created you uniquely. If you don't hear anything else because your anxiety is racing, because you feel like today might have been the day that you would have just ended it and you decided to get up and walk through the door, I want you to know that this is a safe place. And we're going to talk about stuff over the next 4 weeks that are going to be things that honestly the church doesn't talk a lot about at large, especially in the United States. But it's one of the biggest issues that people have, more so than any other wrestling that people have at their core. And so I'm proud of you for being here this morning. And my prayer is that you'll come back over the next 4 weeks as we really wade through these waters and look at what does it mean to look in the mirror. And sometimes we feel like we see somebody different looking back at us. But that's not the design that God had for us. And so I'm really, really honored that you'd be a part of this. If you have a Bible, why don't you turn on over to 1 Peter chapter 5. So 1 Peter chapter 5 is where we'll be at a little bit later in service. If you don't have an easy-to-read translation of the Bible, we give them away for free at our Get Connected table in the lobby. You can also journey together with us today, and there's a couple ways you could do that on your mobile device if you're not ready to get up and do that. You could download the Bible app and just search in your app store for a Bible app. Look for this icon. It has easy-to-read translations of the Bible, audio Bibles. Also, it has reading plans and things. You'll see other people that you know at Forefront that are part of that. And you can download the Forefront app and take notes today, as well as keep up with what's going on during the series. If you're like, man, I wanted to read, but listen or watch back in that part because I was trying to wrap my head around that. It's a great opportunity to do that and get engaged with some of the things that are happening. While you're turning over there, and we'll be there in a little bit, I also want to make note of something that's underneath your seat. You don't have to grab it. I'm going to show it to you like Mr. Rogers. And so, only he didn't have a beard and I don't have a cardigan. And so this card here is going to be under your seat all 4 weeks of the series. We want to make sure that we have an opportunity to engage with you and give you an opportunity to be able to say, I have a question. I want to know what's going on. I need prayer for this and some of the things that are happening. We have pins under there. I'd ask that you leave the pins at least when you're filling it out for next service and the service after that. But this card has some things on there. Man, I just want to share my story. And I want to ask a question. The last week of this series, we're going to do a live Q&A and have myself and Dan Pollard, our adult ministries pastor, and Chris, who was playing up here earlier. Both of them are licensed counselors. And we're going to walk through this together the last week. And so if you have a question, you can ask that on the card. I'd simply like for you to pray for me. I need some help in helping a friend. I need some help personally. And man, I'm not really sure, but I'd like to talk to someone. This is a card that we're going to use over the next 4 weeks, and so I just ask that you take advantage of that, and it may be that you need to stay a little bit after service to fill it out. That's quite all right, but we don't want someone to walk away going, man, I heard this, and I'm trying to engage what's happening, but I just don't know what to do next. I've met people who I would call career Christians who have been at this a while, like since they were a fetus. And then I've met other people who just walk through the door for the first time and they're like, I don't know. Why is everyone standing and sitting down, at the right times and clapping? And I've met people at both ends of the spectrum who say, I just don't know what to do next. And so we want to be able to use this as an opportunity for that, and you're going to get contacted by someone if you ask and put down your information. You might fill it out anonymously, say, I'm not ready to do that, but I have a question that I would love for you guys to address. And so take advantage of that card. It'll be under your seat each and every week over this series. But before we jump in today, because I know that it's going to be tough for some of us. It's tough for me. I've been anxious about my sermon on anxiety, and so we're going to share a little bit about that. And so if your palms are sweaty and you're whatever, and you're breathing heavy and all that stuff, you're in good company in that. And so I want to pray for us today that God will do what only He can do, which is the miraculous. Why don't you pray with me? God, I thank you that we get to be a part of this, that church is not something that we show up to, it's something that we are. That as we gather together, as we come and as we sing and as we honor you, that we make up the body, the church. But today, no matter where we fall on the spectrum, maybe we're very close to you, maybe we are searching and have lots of questions. We need to know that this is a safe place to open up. It's a safe place to have doubts and insecurities. It's a safe place to be depressed and have anxiety. And the myriad of other things that go on in the mental health spectrum, this place is safe. God, let our ears hear you fresh. Let our hearts be ready and receptive to what you're trying to tell us, myself included, when it comes to honoring you, even when things are hard. God, we love you, and it's in Jesus' name we pray as one church. Amen. So, how many of you deal with anxiety? No, we're going to do that. Just kidding. My wife and I both are pretty open with, we have anxiety. I've been on the spectrum more so of medication and things like that. But we both have one instance where our anxiety spikes and then it ends up kind of hitting. And I don't know if you've ever been here, and you may not wrestle with anxiety, but you've had this opportunity to be a part of this, where you both get in the car and you shut the doors and then you pull down the street and then someone asks, what? Did you lock the doors? Ours is, did you shut the garage door? And I'd be like, well, I know I did until you asked me. And it's the weird crux of what transpires. I love my wife. And so it's this weird thing that happens. And I'm normally the driver because I'm also anxious when I let anybody else have control. And so I like to drive. And so I'll be there and be like, I know I did it. And so we will get down the road a ways and kind of debate this back and forth. And by debate, I mean it's our car conversation way of fighting. And we'll drive and eventually get to a place where one of us will be like, let's just go back. Let's just go back. I'm like, and so we'll drive around. But the thing is I get anxious because I'm like, I know I did, but did I? My question. And then I'll have this internal battle inside my own mind about what's happening and what's taking place. And finally we'll do it. And there has never been a time yet that we pulled up to the house and be like, I'm really glad we drove back because that garage door is up. No, it's always like that. But there's something that eats away at us. There's something that just drives us. And I've asked the girls, our daughters that we have, I'm like, does mommy do that when daddy's not around? And our oldest, Chloe, she'll be like, yeah, we pass by the house a lot. Just drive around and do that. But the thing is, and I wasn't going to, and I'm sure they probably sell me out when they're with mommy, but I'll do the same thing because I get my girls ready in the morning and we'll do it, and we'll drive off, and then all of a sudden we drive off, and then Chloe now will ask me, Dad, did you put the garage door down? Why are you like your mother? And so we'll drive around the same thing, and every time, but we'll do it, and I'll question it. Anxiety is tough. And sometimes we can laugh about, these instances and things, but I remember back in college, and I've actually never shared this instance, and a lot of people know that I wrestle with anxiety, which I always think it's God's cruel joke to put me on a stage in front of hundreds of people over the course of a Sunday, and he's like, hey, I need you to talk in front of people. Thanks, God. But in college, it was about 2 weeks in, and kind of snippet, I went to Bible college to find out whether or not God existed. And I was like, if he exists, then I'm going to follow him. And so I'm in week 2 of all kinds of people, and I called them the Jesus people. They just were and raising their hands, and Lord, I lift your name on high, and doing all this stuff. That was the track back then. And they're doing this. I'm like, these people are crazy. But in the back of my mind, I'm just wrestling with all kinds of stuff. I'm like, man, I don't know about this. I don't know about God. I don't know about faith. I remember one morning waking up, and I had Monday, Wednesday, Friday, early classes. So I would wake up in the morning, and I'd go upstairs, and they had workout stuff and workout, and then I come back down to take a shower. And I get in and it wasn't it was like community showers, and they have a bunch of stalls and things. And so I'm in there, and I start hearing all these people kind of walking in, and they're getting in their stalls, doing shower stuff, using the restroom, and something hit. And it's really hard to explain what happens with anxiety. And I've described it once before in a sermon. I had a bunch of people walk up. They're like, while you were explaining your anxiety attack, I had a panic attack like they were talking about it. And so I'll try not to get into that because I don't want to send anyone into one today. But I remember like it just struck, and I collapsed in the shower. I'm like, I don't know what to do. But I was scared and terrified to call out to anybody. I didn't know really anyone, didn't know what to do. So here I am, just a couple weeks into college, at Bible college, and so first class went by, I'm still sitting in the shower. Second class went by, still sitting in the shower. Chapel went through, still sitting in the shower. This is hours. I couldn't move. I was terrified. I was breathing heavy, and no one really knew. And my roommate was gone at the time, and so like I'm just sitting there. Lunch goes by, still in there. I hear people coming in from lunch. I knew that lunch had happened because a lot of people came in to use the restroom, and they had Southern cooking, but it was greasy, and so I'm in there, and it's true, and so I'm sitting in that shower stall, and it's just going, and if you walk in there, nobody's thinking like, man, somebody's been in there for hours. I got out, I missed all my classes that day. I just sat in there, my fingers all shriveled up, I was shaking. I didn't know what to do. I ended up getting myself out of it, going to my dorm room and making it to dinner. Been in there all day. I just cried in my room. God, if you're real, why? And I probably used some verbiage that I won't share this morning. Like, why would you do this? I don't want to be like this. If you're real, why on earth would you allow someone to wrestle with this kind of stuff? I don't know if you're real, and I don't know if I ever want to love you, even if you are. And that was the beginning of my journey of looking at, as an adult, what does it mean to deal with mental illness and anxiety and depression and these things that aren't talked about a lot. The National Alliance on Mental Illness, just to share a little bit of what this looks like. 1 in 4 adults, approximately 61.5 million Americans, experience mental illness in any given year. Approximately 18.1% of American adults, about 42 million people, live with anxiety disorders such as panic disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and phobias. Approximately 60% of adults and almost 1/2 of youth ages 8 to 18 with mental illness received no mental health services in the previous year because things were too full. Mood disorders such as depression are the 3rd most common cause of hospitalization in the U.S. for both youth and adults ages 18 to 45. Over 50% of students with mental health conditions age 14 and older who are served by a special education group drop out, the highest dropout rate of any disability group. Over half of those kids never make it through high school. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, more common than homicide. In the 3rd leading cause of death for ages 15 to 24 years, more than 90% of those who die by suicide had 1 or more mental disorders. Although military members comprise less than 1% of the U.S. population, veterans represent 20% of the suicides nationally. Each day, 22 of our armed servicemen and women will die on U.S. soil because of suicide. Mental health and anxiety and depression and these things are very real. We've seen it even in our own state as we've watched elected officials deal with their families and some of the things that transpire with their loved ones and trying to get them help and trying to change legislation. When we were at Ocean Lakes High School, when we were portable, a young man stood up and started yelling at me, all kinds of profanities, Spanish Inquisition I was being blamed for, and all this stuff, and I was like, what is going on? And we ended up trying to help him, but between drugs and mental illness, we were trying to get him placed We went to 3 or 4 different places and no one would take him. I've helped people time and time again who say, I'm depressed and I want to kill myself. Hey, let's go. Let's try to help you. And the places go, we're full. We have nothing for you. This is the state, and I'm not saying that to be down. This is the culture that we're looking at when we see these numbers and we see the number of people who battle this. That if we wanted to sliver it out, we would say, everybody in the back, you're fine. All the rest of us up front, we're battling it. Ratio-wise, that would be true based on these statistics. And this is from 2014, and they're saying and projecting that now some of those numbers will almost double because of the number of people that are wrestling with some of these things. And so I want to dispel some myths that the church needs to walk through because honestly, this isn't talked about a lot. When I jumped into ministry and when I would talk to parents, because I did student ministry for about a decade, and I would talk with parents who would bring in their children having these issues. They said, I need help, but I can find nothing for them at school. And so I brought them to a counselor, but a counselor really didn't know what to do except give them medication. And it seems like the medication's actually making it worse. And now I'm an advocate. I need to say right out of that, I'm an advocate for God, counseling, and medication when done properly. This isn't one of those things as we walk through these. The depression isn't what the church makes it out to be. Because people say, like, why don't you just not be depressed? Why don't you just not have anxiety? That's like telling somebody with a gunshot wound, could you just stop bleeding? Like, it's just not possible. And yet people, and this has been the stigma in the church for decades, you don't have enough faith. You need to get that under control. Seriously? Like, that's where we're at now? You didn't tell somebody that had a brain tumor, you really need to pray to God more. I can't believe you have that. No one in this room would do that. But then all of a sudden, someone battles with anxiety or depression or a mental disorder, and we go, oh, man. What good news does the church have for those of us who wrestle this? Mental illness is not a sin. When we begin to deal with depression, anxiety, and mental illness and treat it as a sin, all it does is alienate that person. Well, I can't talk about it because the church is just going to tell me that I'm wrong. The church is just going to tell me that I'm broken. I already know I'm broken. That's why I need the church. But then the church walks this out. And I'm not saying here at Forefront, but at the church at large in America, this is what's taking place. And finally, when things like Rick Warren in California, his son battled mental illness and ended up taking his own life. Then all of a sudden, the evangelical church at large is like, well, Rick Warren's like the happiest guy ever. He's got like that purpose-driven life book. Everybody should be happy. And, they live out in California, like sunny California. Like, why would his son do that? And he goes, we've been battling this with our son for years. But the church doesn't want to talk about it. But we're not going to live in fear. And we're going to bring it out into the open. And over the last year and a half, 2 years, there has been amazing strides in being able to open this up. One of the things is that the misconception is that the Bible doesn't provide easy answers. Most of the passages, even some of the ones we'll look at today and over the course of this series, are deeper and more complex than just simply give it to God. Or the phrasing that I share with you guys that you should stop using. Just let go and let God. Just sit back and let him do it. No. These passages run deep and talk about things that sometimes are taken way out of context. Anxiety and depression don't often look how we think they do in the church. You seem happy, you might say to somebody. It's interesting that some of the happiest people that I know battle with depression and anxiety. They're just really good at covering it up. They walk through, hey, how's it going? Hey, because these statistics haven't changed all of a sudden right now. They've changed because we have more knowledge of them, but the same number of people were battling these things decades ago. They were just scared. And so now when you meet someone and they're like, man, you're just so happy, whatever, you're like, I just feel so alone. You're like, what? You're the most joyous person. And I go, man, anxiety all the time. I don't walk around like, woe is me, the world's awful, everybody hates me. But I've battled depression and anxiety almost all my life. And so judging that book by its cover is not the way that we need to approach this. Another thing that people say is strong churches will fix depression. No, they won't. You can go to the most amazing church. I'm biased. I think Forefront is. But so you could go to some place and go be like, man, this place is amazing. These people are amazing. They're singing that song and you're weeping. They're playing Oceans and you're dying. You're doing all this stuff. And then all of a sudden everything's happening and you go, and then you leave and you wake up Monday and you're like, but I'm still sad. Because God is a huge factor in what takes place when it comes to these things of anxiety and depression and mental health and all of these issues that we'll discuss. But just like when we have that brain tumor and we go, I'm going to go to a doctor, I'm going to pray, God heal me, God save me, God take care of me, and God goes, awesome, do that, and then go to that doctor that I sent you to and go deal with that, and you may have surgery, and you may have to cut it out, and you may have to have chemo, and it might be hard. But that doesn't mean that all of a sudden, well, you didn't have faith, God didn't heal. No, you had faith and God healed you. How did God heal you? He took you to a doctor. And in the same way with mental health and anxiety and depression, we have to be able to open up the spectrum as a church and say, we can't just simply pray these things away because we live in a fallen world where we, as people, are broken. And our cop-out can't be, well, God made me that way. God made you. But God didn't make mental illness. The introduction of sin did that. When the world was perfect and man and woman, Adam and Eve, sinned against God, it fractured everything. God made you unique and beautiful and amazing, but your mental illness, your anxiety, your depression is not part of God's plan, but God will use it to glorify Him. See, we live in a fallen world, and so when I can't look at God and go, you made me this way, God will go, no, I made you beautiful. Sin entered the world, and so you're fractured. But I'm going to use your fractured nature to point you back to me in every piece of what we're doing. There's this passage that I want to read this morning. It's not where I asked you to turn. It's actually in Philippians chapter 4. Verses 4 through 9, it's actually Paul writing to the church at Philippi. Paul was an early church planter, went around putting churches in different towns, and then he'd write letters back to them. You know, like Forefront was planted, and then people will look after and take care of us, and we plant other churches. That's what Paul did. And he wrote back this letter to them. It says, rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. You had to really remind them. Let your gentleness be made evident to all. The Lord is near. And he follows up in verse 6, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. In the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. And I love when he kind of shifts gears. And he says, you know what, you're dealing with this depression, this anxiety, this worry, this stuff. I want to point you back to what's true. Let me remind you what's true. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, I want you to take your mind and your body, I want you to think on such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me. I love that because he's saying, listen, even if you didn't catch all what I said, you watched my life. Put it into practice. How brave is that? And the God of peace will be with you. I wrote down in my notes, and it'll be here on the screen. It says, if we cannot first meditate on God internally, it's really taking, all right, I'm going to focus on you. I'm going to put all my energy towards you. Outward comforts, all the things that we want to bring in to try to put, these little like, oh, I'm going to, maybe I need a bigger house, or maybe I need a better job, or maybe we need to do this. All the outward comforts will do no more for us than a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. All the other things that are going, if we don't first focus on God, if we don't first focus on Him, all of our other efforts will be fleeting. They will fade into obscurity. You see, the first and foremost thing that you and I do when we battle these things, or when your loved one is battling these things, is to say first, right out of the gate, you need to bring these things to God. That God is the one who can begin healing and restoration and help you managing these pieces. But that's not the end-all, be-all. Because more often than not in the church, and they would put it this way, but I would say it's not true for mental health. It's that mental health is not a character defect, a spiritual disorder, or an emotional dysfunction. And most of all, it's not a choice. It's not a choice. No one wakes up in the morning like, can't wait to have anxiety. Like, no. Because if you've wrestled with it, you know it's excruciating. No one wakes up in the morning and go, can't wait to be depressed today. It's going to be awesome. Can't wait to wrestle in my own head and feel like there's another person inside of me battling back and forth for control of my life. Nobody chooses that. That's why when we talk about this at the beginning of time, when God set forth creation and everything, this shalom, this rhythm, and then it's fractured with sin, it sets everything off kilter. And we spend the rest of our lives going, God, I'm out of sync with you. He said, let me help you to be back in rhythm with how I designed you. And we will never be fully back in rhythm until we see Jesus again. It will be a daily movement. You will get better and things will get closer, but you will never be fully in rhythm until you get to see his face and you get to be in heaven. And it will be a beautiful thing. That's why even that early church planter, Paul, talks about it. So, man, I have this. He writes this thing to one of the letters. He said, I have this thorn in the flesh, this temptation, this thing that eats away at me, that tries to pull me away from God, but I have to keep reeling it back in. You and I can be redeemed and set free, but living under this broken world, we will not experience the fullness of God until we get to see him face to face. And so what do we do from here? And there's that passage that I asked you guys to hold on in 1 Peter chapter 5. It's actually starting in verses 6 and 7. It says, humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up. And I love that this, it's not that he may lift you up, period, that he may lift you up in what? Due time. Nobody likes that. They're like, wait a second, like I got this time schedule here, God. Like me and you need to hurry this up. Rapido, let's move it along. Let's hustle it up there, brother. And what we do is we create a plan, we create a cycle, we create these things, and God goes, I'm going to lift you up when it's needed. We don't like that. In a world where we can't sit through a drive-through and all of a sudden it's like, man, call this fast food. You know, if you've ever been there, if it's been slow and you're standing in line, someone will turn to you and say that. When you look at them next time, just go, you could go home and make it? Then they'll be like, what? What do you mean go home and make it? Yeah, that's what people used to do. In due time, cast all your anxiety on your spouse. Cast all of your anxiety on your kids. Cast all your anxiety on your job. Cast all your anxiety on your best friend. No. Cast all of your anxiety on him because he cares for you. You know, I like playing sports and being active, and I like to do stuff with my kids. Everybody know what this is? Don't want to assume anything. What is it? Frisbee. Yeah, right? So I could throw this Frisbee. I'm going to throw it here to my friend Jess. Here, right? I threw it okay. You can throw it back. I'll try to catch it one-handed. Look at that. Now, that's how a Frisbee works. You toss it, or some of you guys are weird, and you do that sidearm thing, and there'll be a place for you in heaven. But, I mean, this is just the very nature of how a Frisbee works. Now, if you said to me, Jason, I need you to dribble the Frisbee, that's not really going to, like, I'm really going to try. Or like, all right, we're going to do this. And then we'll keep trying. And, man, I'm going to dribble. It's going to work. You know, if I keep doing this and I'm going to, no, it's not. It's never going to work to dribble this. Now, if I had a basketball, it'd be fine because that's the function of a basketball. But the moment that I try to dribble a Frisbee, it stops moving in its function. It stops doing what it's supposed to do. And yet you and I, every day, God's telling us, here, I need you to cast that. I need you to throw that to me. Going, I got it. Wait, I don't have it. All right, God, I'm going to try it again. Cast your burdens on me. Cast your anxiety on me. Cast all these things on me. All right, God, I'm going to, wait. No, it doesn't work out that way because that's not the way that we were supposed to function. It's not the way we were designed. See, you need to cast it because you weren't designed to carry it. You need to be able to hand that off to God because you and I were never designed to deal with this anxiety, this depression, this burden, these things that we go, I can conquer it. I'm here to lovingly tell you that alone, no, you can't. You can't. As someone who has wrestled with it for years, you can't. I was in a car accident in college. Car flipped over 4 times on Interstate 64 going 60 miles an hour. Hit the middle of the median and bounced off of it. 5 people in the car. I was driving. The axle broke. All of us walked away from it. I didn't get in a car for 2 months. Rode a bike and walked everywhere because I was terrified. But it wasn't simply because of my anxiety and all the other stuff. The reason I didn't get into a car, control. I wanted to do it. All right, God, it was past the point where I was following him and all this stuff. God, I'm going to do it on my own. I'm going to make sure that I can take care of things. It's not the way it works. God, I'm going to dribble this Frisbee. It's like, yeah, you see how that works out for you, bro. He doesn't leave me, he just stands there and watches. All right? You done trying to dribble that thing? And you feel foolish. But what do? We pick it up again. And we dribble it again. And God's going, don't you see? It's not about that form and function. It's about casting it. It's about handing it over to the one that designed us in the first place, that wants to bring us healing, that wants to bring us redemption. And yet we keep doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. What is that? Insanity, or I say stupidity. People are like, that's not very nice. Well, it's the truth. Sometimes the truth hurts. And sometimes many of us need to be told, I love you. Someone needs to sit across the table from you. I love you. I'm sorry you battle this. I'm sorry that you're working through this. And I love you, but you keep doing the same thing. And man, that is real dumb. But I'm not leaving you. And I'm going to stand the gap with you. And so how do we cast our anxiety? How do you cast your anxiety and your depression and your mental illness and these things on God? And I love that Chris and Dan are going to be heading up, these other weeks in the series. Next week, Chris is going to be talking about depression. Dan in the 3rd week is going to be talking about mental disorder. But I would say that even in these moments, there are 3 kind of key ways that you and I can begin to walk through this journey. The first one is to make an appeal. And I would say that that's simply to pray. Say, God, I can't do this on my own, and I'm tired of trying to dribble a Frisbee like a maniac. And so I'm going to hand this over to you because it's the only thing that I know how to do. God, I'm appealing and coming to you first and foremost. One of our core values, the very first one, God first. That's why you see it on the T-shirts with the anchors on them, saying that we want to be rooted and connected to God first before anything else. Make an appeal. God, I want you to help me because I can't do it on my own. The next is to be alert. You need to see the triggers that are happening in your life, the things that trigger you to go down that path. I was setting up our staging at Ocean Lakes when we met at the high school. And I was there by myself. It was my time to pray and and I collapsed there one morning. And my wife remembers me calling her, and I'm breathing heavy. I can't move. I'm like, I don't know what to do. She's like, is anybody there? I'm like, no. She's like, do you need to come and get me? I was like, the time you come here, there's already going to be people here, but I don't want them to see me like this. And I'm wrestling through all of it, and it was a mess. But I realized that day that there were some triggers. I was thinking about a friend that was going through some really hard stuff. I was thinking about some other things that were going on in my own life, and all it took was one moment. And for you might just be like, come on, like, get stressed out or do whatever. Not for a person that's dealing with some of these things. One little change can exponentially send them off the charts. But it's knowing your triggers so that you know when you can stop and change course and go, what are these things that are going on in my life? And you begin to change your behaviors. The third one there is to get aligned. And I wrote down 4 kind of ways to get aligned, actually 5. Get aligned with friends. you have somebody, and we say this all the time, I said it a couple weeks ago, someone that loves God, loves you, loves God more than you, so when you go off the rails, they go, I love you, but you, and remember that conversation sit across the table, you're being dumb. But I can say that because I love God and you, and so let me help you. Aligning ourselves with people. Maybe it's just one person. You're like freaking out. You're like, I don't know, I have 4 people. One of them lives in town. All the rest are out of state that I can call at any moment and say, please talk me off this ledge internally that I'm on because I know that I need help with this. And I could stop right now. If they were preaching right now, 2 of them would be, they would stop their sermon and answer because they know I would need it. You need someone in your corner like that. The other one of that is aligning yourself with a doctor. Don't sit there and go, you can over-spiritualize it and you can be super Christian, all right? If that's you today, I'm here to tell you I love you, but you can't beat it on your own. And so aligning yourself with a doctor that can sit and look and go, hey, God gave me a brain too, and he actually gave me a brain that spent way more years at school than you. And so I want to help you because I know more about the human body than you do. When I need my car fixed, I go to a mechanic. When my head is messed up, I'm going to go to a doctor that can help me with my head. I'm not just going to go, just let go and let God. No. I'm going to give it to God. But then I'm going to align myself with friends, and I'm going to align myself with doctors that can do that. And the other piece of that is aligning yourself with somebody maybe like in a counseling situation. I've been so proud of the church in America embracing counseling, helping people get free from things. Because essentially what counseling is just having a conversation and processing. We do that with friends anyway, but you go, what can I do? Why don't I need to pay for that when I can do that for free with John down the street? Well, John down the street is only going to commiserate with you. Yeah, that's right, and go on. No, and then you sit with Susie in a room and you say the same thing and says, yeah, but yeah, that's probably not a good idea. And you go, wait a second, I always have good ideas. And they go, no, actually that's a bad idea. You should probably stop that because it's wrecking your family. And it's wrecking the pieces of you in the way that it's chipping away at you. How do you cast those things on God? You begin to walk through. You make an appeal to him. You say, all right, I'm going to be alert, and I'm going to get aligned. You know, this Frisbee, we laugh at this as I drop it everywhere. We laugh at this process. But if we were to take a poll today, say, how many of us are dribbling Frisbees with some of these pieces in our life rather than throwing them? We said, we're going to do it anonymous. I'm willing to bet that well over half of us in this room have been dribbling for a long time. And we're frustrated. And what God wants you and I to do is cast it. Because you and I were never designed to carry it. Would you pray with me?